Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Jonas Roach, and I am the news editor here at the Architects newspaper. I'd like to welcome you all to the Beyond the Numbers, How Benchmarking is Driving Smarter Decisions in AE Firms live webinar, a CE Strong webinar series powered by the Architects newspaper. This webinar is sponsored by BQE Software. This program is registered with the AIA CES for continuing professional education. Questions related to specific materials, methods, and services will be addressed at the conclusion of this presentation. This webinar is recorded and can be easily replayed when re-registered on the same webinar registration page. Please allow 7 business days to process certificate of participation and AIA credit reporting for this presentation. We encourage you to ask questions using the Zoom Q&A button found at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now, I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Stephen Burns. As a distinguished thought leader, Stephen blends his passion for design and firm management with profound insights into emerging technologies. Over the past 2 decades, working directly with over 1,400 firm owners, Stephen has significantly contributed to reshaping these businesses for enhanced growth and sustainability. Stephen's career highlights include a 7-year tenure at SOM Chicago, founding BBA Architects in 1993 and growing it to 17 architects before its 2007 sale, and creating ArchiOffice, a groundbreaking project management software company acquired by BQE Software in 2010. Recognized for his significant impact on the profession in 2009, Stephen was elevated to the College of Fellows of the American Institute of Architects. Currently, as founder of the Well-Designed Firm, he focuses on leading AE firms to operational excellence, mentoring leaders to craft businesses as elegant and innovative as the architecture they create. Remember to please leave your questions for the speaker in the Q&A window. Without further ado, Stephen Burns.
Okay, Dan, thank you for the introduction, and let me go ahead and share my screen. And there we go. Okay, welcome everybody. I think you're all seeing that now. So thank you for joining me. That's an embarrassing introduction, but I'll take it anyway. But we're going to talk today about a topic that I think every firm really needs to pay attention to. It's about benchmarking. Hopefully you'll be able to, if you haven't already, get a link to download the benchmarking report that was released a couple months ago from BQE Software here. It's a really special report. I'll tell you why it is in a few minutes. But we're going to talk about not only what are the numbers in these benchmarking reports, but I think what's more interesting for me is to talk about what you can do with these numbers. What do they actually mean? One of my pet peeves very often is because I talk a lot about the technology and the accounting and KPIs all the time. If you've attended any of my other webinars, is there's no sense really in understanding or seeing these numbers on a report, whether it's something about a KPI in your business. Just seeing them doesn't mean anything unless you do something with them. So what is the actionable insights we're going to get from this information? So hopefully this is going to be sort of a session today where not only can you maybe compare your firm to others, hopefully you have the means and methods to actually determine your KPIs. If not, I do encourage you to look more into our sponsor today. But see where you stand by comparing yourself, and then figure out how we're going to improve. So today I'm hopefully going to make it through 13 of the KPIs that are discussed on this report. These are basically the KPIs every single firm needs to know. There are many more KPIs. I have a blog article on my website at thewelldesignedfirm.com with something like 47 different KPIs. I don't ever want a firm to track that many, but depending on what your needs are, there's a lot of KPIs you can actually be tracking. So these are important to understand whether you are a solo practitioner, as very often I come across a lot of firms that are if they're not solo practitioners, they're certainly just a few employees. You still need to know these, even if you're a firm with 200 or more people. Okay, so let me just move on here. So we are going to look at this report. What I really love about this benchmarking report is it will break it down by firm size. BQE is using quartiles, so we're going to talk about the average firm, let's say, that's in the second quartile, but we're going to look at the lower performing firms in the first quartile, and of course the high performing firms, which is what we all aspire to be, that is going to be in that third quartile. And what's really special about this is, because of the nature of the business of BQE, they're not sending out surveys to firms and asking them to fill out the data. They're actually looking directly into the anonymized data of more than 2,000 firms, and with more than 46,000 employees who are using that software and contributing to the data, and finding out what the true numbers are, not what firms like to report when they are asked in a survey to tell them how they feel about their firm's, profitability whatsoever. So that is not only a very large uh, cohort of firms that are being benchmarked here, but it's undisturbed numbers. These are the numbers, the raw numbers that we're looking at here. Now, the first KPI we're going to look at is one I talk about very frequently in other webinars, which is, what is your revenue per full-time employee? And it's actually one of my favorite KPIs because it does give you a very quick and honest look into how efficient your firm truly is. And the way you calculate it is you take your total net revenue, and that's your net revenue. Okay, so take out all those billable or reimbursable expenses that you have, the pass-through expenses that you have, and divide that by the number of full-time employees. And that means every single person in your company. If you do have part-time employees, you have to convert that into a full-time number. Because in the end, the revenue of all of your projects is going to need to cover the full cost of running your business. And that does include the overhead people, marketing and administrative people. So if you do have any staff that are not working full time, just prorate that number in the denominator and make this based on a full-time effort. If you're not honest with this number, by the way, you're going to get a very different number. So truly look at everybody who's touched your company over the year. Now, if you take into account firms of all sizes, the average is at about $170,000. That is not very different than what I see on other survey reports, though. So there are some KPIs here which are dramatically different, but this one is pretty close. It tends to run in the 165 range when I see other ones. This is a little bit higher, and I do believe there are reasons for that as well, but that has to do with the nature of using technology. But that number of 170,000 doesn't really just tell the full story. You're going to find in this report there is a cover page that gives you sort of like the definition and the big number, but then you go to the second page of every KPI, and this is where it will tell you a couple things. First, it's going to show you the second quartile, which is the middle bulk, and then it's going to show you either end. So the bottom, let's say the bottom 25% is the first quartile, and the top 25% is that third quartile. And the other really nice thing on this benchmarking report is it will break it down by firm size. So if you are a firm of 14 people, go ahead and look at the 11 to 20 group. Don't get all vertutscht, if you will, about what the numbers are for the firms of 50 plus employees. So it's nice to know what it is overall for the industry, but of course, focus in on that cohort, that size of firms that you are. The other really nice thing is you're going to see in this report at the very bottom, there's a little gray number that says N equals 694 in this particular case. And what is going on is, even though there are about 2,000 plus firms who are being used, it was determined for the revenue per full-time employee metric. There was only data in 694 firms that was unquestionably solid data. They wanted to get out anything that might confuse it with incomplete data or whatever. Sometimes firms have, not everybody's using the software properly, or they're partial years and things of that nature. They migrated data in. So they wanted to cleanse the data to make sure that any firm they were looking at had honest, good, full data. So this one was 694. And honestly, that still is way more firms than you get in almost any other industry survey report. So anyway, you can notice that the top high-performing firms are earning over $200,000 per full-time employee. Uh, and the low-performing firms are just squeaking by with a $112,000. Now, if your number is really below the benchmark for your cohort, that is basically a red flag. Maybe it is time for you to think how effectively your team is actually being deployed, whether you're doing the kind of work that actually brings in the right kind of revenue. Okay, so keep that in mind. Why are we low? Just ask yourself, why am I underperforming here? So your main goal will be to optimize staff effectiveness and doing that without increasing the number of your employees. And I think the easiest way you can achieve this is if you will invest in improved technologies and then leveraging those technologies that you already have. So just as an example, if you're using some sophisticated CAD BIM software, actually start finding time to get your staff to truly understand how to use these tools to their optimum effect, and you're going to find this number is going to start moving up. Now, there are a couple of different ways you could use this particular KPI. It's a backward-looking KPI that tells you how did we perform over a period of time. And that could be last month or last quarter, or in this case, we're looking at it over a year. But the other way you can use this is as a forward-looking KPI. So if you have some growth plans, you're going to be able to determine if you're on target, looking at the revenue we're getting from the current pool of employees. If you have some sort of operating budget, which I hope you all do, is it going to be supported by the revenue numbers that are showing up here? How would we going to have to do to ensure that we can achieve these goals within our budget? And if you intend to hire any new employees, you're going to kind of know what the impact will be. And of course, the larger your firm is, this number will be less impacted by it. But for smaller firms, every time you hire an employee, it's going to create a more significant swing in that. Okay, that's enough time on the first KPI. Next up is a similar one is the expense that your firm incurs for every one of its full-time employees. I'll go through this one a little bit faster. We do have some more important KPIs coming up, and I do always want to leave enough time for Q&A, and as some of you may know, I do tend to run long. Now, okay, so this is sort of the converse to the previous one. Rather than saying the revenue that you get from every one of your employees, let's just look at what we spend on all of that. So this takes into account the full operating expenses of your business. And of course, it divides that by the number of your full-time employees. Now, you should notice there is a pretty significant gap between each of these quartiles. And I think it's worth unpacking that number. First, we should talk about location will matter. So a firm in New York or San Francisco or here where I am today in LA, they'll naturally have higher rents, higher salaries, and they're going to have overall higher costs than a firm that's operating in Wichita, Kansas. So while our data here is broken down by firm size, that's very helpful. I do think we should be mindful about the role that geography may play here. There's also something interesting in scale. So firms with a 21 to 50 employees show a noticeable drop in their per person expenses. And I don't have the raw data on that. My hunch is this is kind of the benefit of scale. And I'll have to assume without more information that the firms that are greater than 50 employees, maybe they are truly in major metropolitan areas and are subject to much higher expenses. Don't really know, but worth noting that. But this is what I want you to take away from this one KPI. It is expensive to develop new processes or implement the kinds of technologies that I believe truly do improve your business operations and certainly project delivery. That's going to take time, and it's going to take energy, it's going to take investment. But it is really not very expensive, or it's not expensive at all to manage your expenses. So cutting costs, when you do it strategically, they're going to have very big results, and they're going to have minimal disruption when you do it right. So you can slash your rent in half, by rethinking your office footprint. You can reduce insurance premiums by maybe a third, maybe just by rebidding your policy every couple of years. You can even make the difficult decision to eliminate a role in your firm if that role is not truly adding value, which, by the way, is a reason you need technology like today's sponsor so you could actually see at the individual employee level, are these people truly adding value to the firm? Anyway, these are all kinds of ways you can immediately reduce your expense load without hurting the quality of your work. So yes, improving your efficiency through those systems and the training, that's going to take a little bit of effort. Managing your expenses, that's something you can start doing right after today's webinar, and it will directly go to your bottom line. Number 3 is, what is the firm's profit per full-time employee? So these first 3 KPIs are just about looking at it with the size of the employee group we have. And it is not enough to simply grow your revenue. What matters is whether that growth is actually being translated into profits. And this is that metric that tracks that. So you might see your revenue per employee is rising year over year, but if your profit for the employee isn't increasing at that same pace, or maybe it's worse, it's actually declining, and that happens, that's going to be a red flag. Something could be wrong with your cost structure. The operations are not working well. This metric is a great way to catch that problem early before it starts to affect your cash flow and your firm's long-term sustainability. We're going to go deeper into this on the next slide. It's just one of those KPIs that ties everything together: revenue, expenses, staffing decisions. It's all here. Profit is, of course, the one thing that I think every firm is very much interested in. The lower your profit per employee, the more vulnerable your business becomes. More revenue alone will not save you if there's nothing left over at the end of the day, and there's going to be no shortcut. You can't just say, let's hire another person and we're going to fix the problem. Because as I think you may know, if you add staff, that could also backfire. Certainly, it's going to drive up your expenses. And if you don't have a proportional increase in your profit, then the question is, why would we do that? And hiring does impact more than just the revenue. It's going to add complexity, overhead, management demands. So I don't think you should take this decision lightly. So what are the things that do move the needle here? Again, it's better systems and smarter processes. And better yet, a team that knows how to use these things. That is where I, time and time again, see the biggest returns. So please, again, invest in your staff, train them on the tools that you already have invested in, reinforce your workflows, and I guess look for ways to make the day-to-day more efficient. Every single hour saved, every task that you could streamline, that's where the profits are going to grow. I think it's nice to look at how does this play out across firms of all sizes, right? Smaller firms, they average around $38,000 per full-time employee. Firms with 20 to 50, they're 20% more profitable. And I think the reason why is because they have built the infrastructure, they do the training, they have the technology and the systems that allow them to scale efficiently. That is the kind of operational maturity that doesn't just reduce friction, it actually generates results, and those results are in the form of profits. Now, for the largest cohort, there's a big drop in profitability, and I think this may have to do with these large firms really invest heavily in themselves. A lot of growth going on there. They are subject to other endeavors that maybe the smaller firms don't, and so that's definitely going to have hit there, but that allows them to keep their stature. Okay, we're going to look at 2 related multipliers. So number 4 here is, what's your break-even multiplier? And then after that, we're going to look at its cousin, which is your overhead multiplier. And there's always a bit of questions about why do we need to do both. But the break-even multiplier, it tells you what you need to charge if you were charging on an hourly basis, which I try to not recommend. if you just want to cover the costs of running your business. So there's no profit included in this. Of course, it's just your break even. This is how it works. You take, once again, your total net expenses. These are the costs that you pay out of pocket to keep your business running. Do not include your reimbursable expenses, and you divide that by your direct labor costs. And direct labor means the wages and the benefits for the staff who are working on projects, not doing administrative work or marketing work. So let's say that you have an employee that costs you $50 an hour, that includes their benefits. If your break-even multiplier is, as it's shown here, at 2.59, that means you need to bill that $50 an hour person out at $130 an hour just to cover your overhead. We're not making any profit here. It's a pretty important metric to have in your toolbox because it gives you the baseline for setting your fees. If you don't know your break-even multiplier, you're going to be guessing. And I promise you, guessing is what leads to your undercharging. Once you know this number, now you can price your work, you can do it with confidence, and you can make sure that you're all not just staying busy doing work, but you're actually staying in business here. So recent survey says most firms are performing at break-even rate at 2.4. High-performing firms, those are again in the third quartile, they're closer to 1.9. That means they keep their overhead low relative to their billable labor. But it also does get a little bit nuanced because a lower multiplier, that isn't automatically good news. If your multiplier is too low, I don't know what that really means when I say too low, but it could signal that you are underinvesting in key areas like in your software, in your training. It could also be you're underinvesting in your staff by not paying them competitive rates. And of course, if you pay competitive or better than competitive rates, you're going to get better employees, the best in class, if you will. And there is a snowball effect that I've talked about before. Now, on the flip side, if your multiplier is too high, let's say it's above 3, that usually means your expenses have been creeping up and it's time you need to take a closer look at where does all the money go in our company. So this one is a balancing act. A high multiplier paired with low profit, that's going to be a problem. But if you do have a high multiplier, but you also have strong profits, that might indicate that you are actually investing in growth, or you're now operating in a high cost market, or really have decided you are going to pay your staff extremely well for that market. And all of that is fine. So it's not just about any single KPI, it's about the full picture you're going to get when you look at these numbers. And there's another reason, by the way, that I'll recommend you track these numbers over time. Don't just glance at this report that comes out once a year and look at your numbers once a year and then you move on. What I want you to do is watch how it changes. If you can't do it month by month, make a habit of doing it quarterly. So if you were able to bring it down from 2.8 to 2.5, this is great. But what's also happening to your firm's profitability when you made that happen? If your multiplier's gone up, but your profits also increased, maybe those additional expenses are in fact paying off, and don't get all hot the collar about that. None of these KPIs should be looked at in isolation. They all work together. If you can understand how they relate between them, that is where you're going to get some real strategic insight. Okay, a close cousin is number 5. What's your overhead multiplier? This looks specifically at how much overhead you carry for every dollar that you're spending on your direct labor. It's a way to measure your firm's internal weight. Things like, oh, what is our rent and all of that administrative salaries and our insurance costs and the money we're spending on our subscriptions for our software, things that may not be directly billable. So mathematically, the way you calculate it, it's simple. You just take your break-even multiplier, which we just looked at, and you just, the break-even multiplier is this plus 1. Okay, I guess that's how I should be doing that. So you're saying, wow, well, by the way, with the 1, so this 1.59 would be 2.59 for the break even. The 1 represents that particular individual, that person, a human being. So you're saying, well, they're obviously so closely related. Why do we need to track both? And here's why. Because they're going to give you two different but equally valuable lenses on the business, so that this overhead multiplier, it's great just to understand what's the internal cost structure. It helps us evaluate how efficient we are at running our firm and whether we're carrying too much overhead relative to the work that we're taking on. But that break even multiplier, that's what you want when you're setting your fees. It just tells you what you need to be billing for every hour just to cover the full cost of running the firm before you make any of that profit. So yes, they're kind of linked. One's focusing this conversation on your efficiency and your internal operations, and that other one was the one we just looked at a minute ago, which is how can we price our work appropriately. And I think tracking both of these just gives you it puts your mind in the right uh, place to think about the business and the projects. And again, that allows you to make better strategic decisions. I won't go into detail on this one. Get that down, that report, download that. Just remember, when you do look at these things, focus on your firm's size first, then kind of look how you compare also across the quartiles, see where you fall on that. Number 6 is, what is the firm's billing multiplier? This is an interesting one. So a moment ago, we looked at that break-even multiplier, and that is rooted in your internal costs. They tell you, what do we need to charge to cover for all of our expenses? And this one is looking at it from the other side of the tube. It's also, for some of you, referred to as your multiplier achieved. And it's showing you, what did you actually earn relative to all that billable labor? So instead of us dividing our expenses by our direct labor costs, we're dividing our revenue by our direct labor costs. So let's say, we'll go back to this example, your direct labor cost is that $50 an hour. If your multiplier achieved is 3.0, that means you are bringing in, you've earned $150 per hour of revenue. That's what you've earned for every employee that's costing you $50 an hour. And that's solid. If your break-even multiplier is 2.7, you're not just covering your costs. We had 2.7 over there. You're now running at a profit because we've got ourselves at the 3.0. If your multiplier achieved is hovering close to or below the break-even multiplier, clearly your firm is experiencing a problem. You are working hard, you're staying busy, but you're not generating profits. So what are you going to do about that? One of the lowest hanging fruits to solve this problem is your scope creep. I see this all the time. You have project managers, maybe they're trying to keep the clients happy. They'll do extra work without flagging it as an additional service. And it feels like this is good client service in the moment, but over time, it really eats away at firm profitability. I hate to use this example, but I've never known a lawyer to give away extra services just to keep their clients happy. That's a discussion for another day. Another lever that you have are your fees. So are you charging appropriately for the value that your firm is delivering? Too many firms underprice their services based on what they believe the market typically charges, instead of what their work is actually worth. And this, by the way, is my topic for my webinar for the fourth quarter of this year. So look out for that. It's about setting your fees correctly. So sometimes if you have just a small bump in your billing rates, or you shift to, as I'm going to be recommending at that webinar series, value-based pricing, that is going to have the same effect on your firm as compound interest. A very small change, when you apply it consistently, can actually transform your firm's performance. So think of this metric as a scorecard. If you're delivering great work and you are staying within scope and you do price your work strategically, your multiplier achieved is going to reflect it. And of course, watch how it changes over time. Now, there's this long-standing rule. I think most of you know about it in professional practice. You should be billing 3 times your cost. So if someone costs you that $50 an hour in their salary and their benefits, the idea is their billable hourly rate should be $150 an hour. That is where you're going to get that 3x multiplier that's been around for many, many decades. When we look at the data here, we're going to say that that's a generally true thing. The second quartile, the middle 50%, is typically landing around 3x. But I do want to challenge this a bit. This rule of thumb, it is, as I said, decades old. A lot has changed in the world. I believe every single firm should target themselves to hit 3.25, better yet, 3.5. That is where I typically see the healthy firms. And then you can reinvest in your staff and your systems and have some real long-term sustainability. Just look at the third quartile here. They are at 3.9. I mean, that's not quite, but almost twice what it is for the first quartile. And I want you to understand that this, what do we charge is not just about doing some math. $50 an hour, make it times 3.0 or 3.5, whatever you want. It's okay. It is about value. Your multiplier that you're going to see here, this multiplier achieved, is only as strong as your firm's positioning. If you are quoting the same fees as everyone else, your client really has no way to differentiate you from the next firm. You need a very clear, unique selling proposition, a reason that your client should choose your firm, and at the same time, gladly pay you more for it. That's the story your firm needs to tell. That's also where I see the larger firms pull way out ahead here. They have built reputations, they have the systems and the depth, and they use that to justify higher fees. But as you can tell in this KPI, you don't have to be a 100-person firm to do this. You just need to be intentional about how you tell your firm's story. So I would just want to close here and just tell you, rather than just defaulting to the market rate, I do want you to start taking a step back and asking, what is the real value that I'm going to be providing this client? And if your architecture is unique, your fees should be too. And honestly, we have got to stop being embarrassed about charging appropriately for something that we love doing, and some of you will even do it for free. Number 7, once again, it ties everything together because it's about profit. It's your net profit margin. It is the clearest indicator of whether all this effort is actually paying off. So each one of these KPIs tells us a little something specific, like what we need to charge, or how efficiently we're delivering our work, or how we're managing our expenses. And this one is the bottom line. It's just what is left over after everything is said and done. And the goal for you is to convert all of your team's hard work into meaningful profit. That's what gives you the ability to reinvest in your firm, whether that means those better tools and the higher salaries and the training programs, or better just building some financial resilience. A healthy net profit margin is not just a number. It is actually something that enables you to do everything else you want to do in your business when this number is healthy. And the good news, this is really the fantastic news here, from at least from this data set, as opposed to what we see in other industry KPI benchmarking reports, is most of the firms here are profitable firms. The average net profit margin came in at around 20%. Now, if your firm is at 10%, certainly don't shrug that off, but it is not something I want you to be celebrating. Given the amount of risk that is associated with running an AE firm, the liability, the overhead, the uncertainty, 10% is going to leave you very little margin for error. I strongly believe your firm needs to target 20% or more. Look at that. The top performers are at 33%. This is where you gain stability and breathing room and that ability to invest in your people and invest in your firm's future. Now, I think the reason that we're seeing higher profit margins in this cohort is because these are firms that have really invested in building, using technology to help manage their projects' finances, their overall firm budgets. And so it's a part of their culture at this point. And they're going to see problems in real time and solve problems, as opposed to those of you out there who are running your businesses with spreadsheets, which are fraught with mistakes and a huge time suck. And generally, you're going to get that data long after you had the opportunity to fix the problem. So please, again, invest in your technology. Okay. And the other nice thing is you're going to notice, look at the small firms, the 0 to 1 to 10 firms, they're coming in at 19.1, okay, on average. So that is great. So this is the number one KPI I know of. It's called utilization rate. Everybody, I think, understands it. I don't know how it made it out into the zeitgeist. It is the worst KPI I know of, and I'll tell you why I feel that way. But it is the defining it is it's the percentage of time that your entire team in your firm, again, that's everybody in their company walks in the door there, or the virtual door, is spent on billable work. Okay. And you base this on a full-time schedule to make this work. So it's 2,080 hours a year. And right off the top, we're going to have to take 10% and go put that to PTO, holiday, sick day, jury duty, whatever you do. That's going to leave a cap, a max really of 90%, which is available for actual work. So don't think that, oh, my employees need to be, 95% utilized. No, this is the raw utilization information. Now, not all of that remaining time after PTO should be billable. I don't want it to be. You have internal meetings, you have management, business development, training. This is all absolutely critical to your firm's health. So when you see here that the average utilization rate is at 64%, don't scoff at that and say, oh, we're at 82 or something like that, because higher is not automatically better. So this is my least favorite KPI because it's like stepping on a scale. You're going to get some kind of a number, and you're going to feel really good about it or bad about it, depending on what you see there. But it really doesn't give you a good indication of the true health of that body that is stepping on that scale. Okay, and then we're going to look at the next KPI in a moment, which is realization rate, which is my absolute favorite KPI. And we're going to talk about kind of like the differences between these things. So don't look at this number for your firm and feel good and then move on. There's real purpose in understanding what is happening here. You need to plan the time of your staff with intentionality. Budget hours for them to do marketing and training and leadership development. That non-billable time is not going to be wasted. It is an investment in your company. And if you do it right, your team becomes more valuable, they'll become more efficient, and ultimately they will make you more profitable. Also, by the way, this is a KPI that does vary by role. So don't expect the utilization rates for your management team to be the same as it is for your, young staff, an intern, something like that. Which, by the way, when you have great software, you're going to look at the utilization rate for every one of your employees, and you should set goals for them, because for some of them, you want to set that goal low. You really want them focusing their time on other things that will allow that flywheel effect to happen by making the other people really, really much more effective in their work. So do not look at utilization rates as an end, an end in itself, and high ones are something that you should be striving for. It maybe it's kind of useful to you, but you have to view it in context. And balance is always going to be the goal here. And the real performance story is looking at the rest of those KPIs, and then my favorite, which is up right now, number 9, realization. This is also key to having you achieve profitability. So unlike utilization, which is just telling you how much time your team is spending on projects versus overhead things, realization tells you how much of that billable value actually was turned into revenue, actually made it into your bank account. In other words, how much are you invoicing and collecting based on all the work that your team is doing on their projects or on behalf of your clients? This is how it works. You take your net revenue and you divide it by the potential billable value of the time that was worked. So let us say that the team works, make this math easy for me, 1,000 billable hours, and your average billing rate is $100 an hour. That is $100,000 in potential revenue. If nobody stopped you from billing what you really should be billing, that would be $100,000. If you ended up invoicing or receiving revenue for that effort, that's $83,000. That's your realization rate, 83%. So that means you only invoiced 83 cents for every potential dollar that worked, and it is that gap that is the killer. Low realization often points to some deeper problems. Maybe, again, your scope wasn't clearly defined and you're working for free. Maybe you're discounting your work too much because your client, you're trying to keep them happy. Maybe your project managers are letting work slide into that non-billable territory because they want to keep the clients happy. Maybe your staff was being given poor direction and they're just wasting time waffling in their work, and they're going to have to redo it later because someone's not truly managing them. They're not proceeding with real purpose. So the utilization will tell you how busy they are, and that all looks great. Look at they're working. Realization is telling you whether that busyness is really paying off for your firm. And it also reflects how smart firms are really thriving. Yeah, it is, by the way, it is calculated based on the hours you work, but not everything we bill is tied to our hours, especially if you're doing it right and you're doing fixed fees or value-based billing systems. And I think hopefully many of you are pricing your work using fixed fees. And when you do that well, you're not just covering your time, you actually end up capturing value. And that is where we see realization rates that exceed 100%. That's my dream, by the way, for all of you, is I want every one of you to strive to have a realization rate that is not just 100%, but greater than 100%. And when you move toward value-based pricing, and then you combine that with those smart investments in our tools and our training and our efficiency, that is when you unlock the potential to dramatically increase profitability. And then your realization rate becomes the proof of all that. It is no longer being tied just to our time. It reflects the return on your expertise, on your creativity, on your process. By the way, it is not just a binary choice. When you hear people talk about value billing or fixed fee billing, you can actually make a blend of these things. Some phases, maybe pre-design or schematic design, concept design, those are open-ended. They're kind of unpredictable. There's a lot of human interaction with your client at that point. For those, maybe making services hourly with the appropriate hourly rate, these are typically the phases when you bring huge amount of value to a project. So make sure you're billing it hourly at the right rate. That makes sense. But those other phases, like design development, certainly construction documents, these are much more under your control, much more predictable. Certainly the CD phases. Okay, so these are the phases where you should be able to fix your fees. And here's the magic. Once you fix a fee, every hour you save through the systems or the smarter tools, that goes directly to your bottom line. You become the beneficiary of your own efficiency. If all you did was bill hourly, only your client benefits from your investment. This is the best metric in your toolkit. If your realization is below 90%, something is wrong, scope creep, bad fee structure, bad systems. If you're over 100%, you have built a firm that captures the real value of what you deliver. And that is our goal. And I promise you, it is totally achievable. Number 7, what's our average contract value? It's kind of an important metric to pay attention to when you're thinking about your firm's overall positioning and what is our revenue strategy going to be. Simple formula, you just take your total contract value over a given period, I would say a year. What's the value of all the contracts that we sign? And you just divide it by the number of contracts. That's your average fee per project. Now, for some of you, especially firms that work on large, complex projects, this number might look surprisingly low. And there are a few good reasons for that. You might be taking on smaller engagements that are stepping stones to getting the larger projects. Maybe it's a quick feasibility study, a quick concept package, a zoning analysis for one of your regular clients. And these very small initial contracts, they'll drag down that average, but they do lead to much larger jobs in the end. Also, by the way, there are some firms that actually build their practice model around high volume, lower fee work. So, for example, maybe retail tenant improvements or repeated office fit outs for the same client over and over again. These are real contracts. They often represent small slices of a much bigger relationship. So I don't want you to panic if the number feels low for your firm at first glance. Instead, just ask yourself, is this a reflection of our business model, of our mix of projects? Is it good client strategy? Is it a signal that we need to better position ourselves for some higher value work? It can reveal a lot, not just about what you're doing, but about how your clients perceive the value of your work. And I think that's a conversation that you should have within your firm. I'm going to move on because see if I want to add anything here. I should point out, though, for those firms that are thinking about their succession planning, if they're thinking about an M&A event in their firm, the higher this number is, the greater your firm's valuation is going to be. This is basically work under contract, and if you're a company that's built around low contract value, high turnaround, they don't last very long. There's not a great way to guarantee what the future is going to look like. So long contract, 18 months, 3 years, things of that nature with a high contract value show a solid investment for anybody else who's looking to invest into your firm. Average collection period. It does shine a light on your firm's cash flow health. You take your current accounts receivables balance, run your accounts receivables balance today, divide that by the total net revenue that you receive over the past year, and then multiply that by 365. So the result is going to be the average number of days it takes between when you send out your invoice and when you actually get paid for that. And this number of almost 50 days is, to me, just horrible. This, to me, is one of the indicators of what is kind of like wrong with our industry. There may be, for some of you, a real reason why your clients need that much time to pay you, but you call the shots on this one. I think in a period where we can send out, if we have good technology, like our sponsor today, you can electronically invoice your clients. They can electronically pay you. It's not like you have to print out an invoice, put it in the mail, wait 4 days for it to get in their hands, get processed. Somebody has to look at it. Somebody else has to put it into an accounting system. Somebody's got to wait till they decide to print their checks. And, that's where 30 days came from. Okay, 30 days it took for it to move on the backs of a horse to your client and back to you. No, this has got to end right now. please, while asking people to pay upon receipt, maybe pushing it for some of you, we do this with some clients. Okay, you received my bill. I actually worked 30 days ago to earn this invoice today. Why do I need to wait another 30, or in this case, 50 days to get paid? That's 80 days. 80 days from the time somebody actually put pen to paper to do some work before their client's paying you for it. It's unacceptable. Please, there's so many things we can do to change this. Again, I mentioned ways to improve this. Let's move to electronic invoicing. Let your clients pay electronically. They will totally appreciate the simplicity of having this technology. If you're worried about the fees of having electronic transactions, get over it, or pass those expenses on to your client. Put that in your general conditions of your contracts. Share it with your clients if it's going to be, 2.5% fee or something. If you want them to use a credit card, you could share it with them if you want. Just to get that money in your hand, get it in sooner. I also want to let you know, technology is not going to solve it alone. Too many firms send out their invoices and they do nothing. Follow up on your invoices. Ask if there are questions. Don't wait for them to question you. They're not going to always do that, or they'll do it at the very end when it's due. Please be proactive about your collections. Use technology that makes collections part of the culture and makes it very easy to do that. There's some information on the benchmarking report about the impacts that just introducing electronic invoicing and payments has done. So that's great news there. Year-over-year revenue growth. Let me just make a quick comment on this one. It's kind of more of a KPI into the broader economic trends. And the data coming here from BQE core users who have used the software for consistently for 2+ years is they're only growing at 6.4%. If you're above that, great, you're doing well. Growth can come from additional kinds of projects, increased fees, entering into new markets, or being in a place where you have strong repeat business. Either way, these are signals for momentum, and you'll just notice the first quartile, -17%. I think we can all think of what the stories are about what's going on. It's probably the markets that those are served by, those firms out there. There's some really wonderful forward-looking reports. I know one comes out of PSMJ that looks at the industry trend coming up for the next year. Read these things. What's going on in the global economics, let's just say macroeconomics, understand where our firm needs to be to meet the markets, because those firms in the first quartile are clearly suffering. You want to be in that third quartile, growing at 20%. Backlog, this is really just looking at the revenue capacity that's under contract. So the higher the number that you see here, the less hard you have to work. So if you have 75% backlog, that's probably a signal that you need to expand your team. Okay? When your backlog is below 25%, something's going to need to happen. Do it in your marketing work, biz dev work, maybe you need to plan for downsizing. When your firm is at 50 to 75%, you've got about 6 to 9 months of runway. That is a healthy place for your firm to be. But I have to be honest with you, after the prior growth KPI, this is the next dismal KPI as well. I don't know if this is truly a harbinger of tough times ahead for our industry. These are sort of maybe a leading indicator of what's going on here. So keep that in mind. Okay. Always look for trends. Okay. Look at these quarterly, not annually. Maybe look at it monthly. How are your metrics moving? How do they interact with one another? Again, if your utilization rate's going up, what's happening to your profit? Is it helping? Are you burning out your staff? Maybe you're missing out on some of that non-billable stuff, some marketing initiatives you should be taking care of. These are all about making strategic, informed decisions, not just chasing around one of these KPIs in its isolation. Okay, I do want to thank the folks at BQE Software for inviting me to speak to you today. I do want to encourage everybody here. There's going to be a poll question that's going to be launched. Please just say yes. There it goes to the poll question. Let the fine folks at BQE Software give you a demo of this phenomenal business and project management platform. It's called BQE Core. It is the kinds of technology that I've been referring to throughout today's presentation. And I promise you, the time you spend looking at that demo with them, it's going to be well spent. At the same time, I do want you to do your homework. Look at the other software solutions that are out there in the market. Even if you're using another one of those solutions and you might even be happy with it, get the demo so you could see what are the differences. And if you're not using anything yet and you're looking to move into one, all I would ask for you is to say, is that going to serve you for the long haul? Because one of the worst things you can do is invest in getting your firm into a system and then finding out it doesn't have enough oomph or whatever to last to as you begin to scale and grow, doesn't have the tools to really serve you in the long term. So with that, I will pass it back. Dan, I think maybe we have some questions, and I'm going to also put up on my screen right here. If you want to reach out to me, boom, there you go. That's my contact information and info on BQE. And so, Dan, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Yeah, we have time, I think, for one or two questions. The first one being, how often should firms revisit or update their benchmarks to stay aligned with changing industry trends?
Okay, so for some of you, it will be annually. Because I don't think you need to touch a strategic plan more than once a year. But as I mentioned a few times during the presentation, quarterly is really good, but you don't need to visit every one of these things quarterly. But think about it, it's 10, maybe 10 KPIs. If you have the technology that can actually produce them, like today's sponsor, it takes almost no effort to see these KPIs and have a discussion. So monthly isn't a problem either. But that's the point I really want to make is if you do it monthly and you see stuff happening that's close to real time, if you will, then you can make tweaks in your business so that by the end of that year, you can revisit it and look at it and see, how has it changed? So I can't tell you. It really depends on the culture of the firm there, Dan. If it's quarterly, monthly, or annually.
Great. I think we have time for one more. How can benchmarking help with things like talent retention or project delivery efficiency beyond just financial outcomes?
Yeah, well, these are only 13 KPIs, as I mentioned. I've got like 47 of them that you should be tracking. And for this person who asked that question, if talent retention is an important issue for their firm, or they sense that there's a problem here, you need to start tracking it. Because as we know, if you don't monitor it, you can't manage it. Sometimes people think that if you monitor it, you will then therefore manage it. But as I think I know, people just monitor it and sometimes don't do anything with it. So I would say identify what is the metric we want about retention. So it would be how often do we have impactful employee review sessions? Is it once a year? Maybe we need to increase that to every quarter. How often between those true reviews do we have leadership interacting with the employee to make sure that they are having job satisfaction or getting the kind of support or mentorship that they need? So you define the KPI that's important for your firm, then you figure out how to monitor that. So easy enough. If you were using employee reviews, actually you can use the sponsor software. They have a great review system in there. It schedules it for both the employee and the reviewer. They can sit down, it sees it on their calendar, they can document it, they can track how they do. And you, if you're administering the firm, you should say, hey, look, this guy, this partner isn't doing their reviews. We need to work on it. So have systems that can help you manage these things that are important to you.
Thanks, Stephen. That brings us to time, so I'm just going to give some closing words. Thank you all so much for attending the live webinar Beyond the Numbers, How Benchmarking is Driving Smarter Decisions in AE Firms, a CE Strong webinar series powered by the Architects newspaper. This presentation was sponsored by BQE Software. This webinar is recorded and can be easily replayed using the same registration link. Please allow 7 business days to process certificates of participation and AIA credit reporting for this presentation. A big thank you again to our presenter, Stephen Burns, and to BQE Software for sponsoring this webinar. We hope to see you all again at our future event. Have a great day.
Thanks all.